Summer gardening in Texas and other hot climates is not for the faint of heart. It requires a combination of healthy soil, planting the right varieties, and a few other season extending techniques. High UV rays and drought conditions are often persistent. Germinating seeds directly in the garden has some unique challenges, and tender seedlings are an open invitation to birds and scavenging insects. Follow along as I share my tips for what to plant, direct sowing techniques, and other summer gardening hacks for growing vegetables in hot climates such as Texas. What's up everyone, it's Scott from New Garden Road. You know I'm here to inform, inspire, and elevate you. Encouraging biodiversity and restoring habitat is my mission, one garden at a time. Here we are in the middle of July. If you want to plant some vegetables in your garden, you can look at transplants of peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants. That's going to time out for a fall harvest. Once the temperatures cool down, as those set up, you should be in good shape. If you try planting those crops from seed right now, you want to think about it because it's going to take longer for them to mature and set fruit, and that's going to push into the time of year when the days are shorter. You can plant a lot of seeds directly in the garden right now. Some of my favorites are okra, southern peas, long beans. You can even do a variety of warm season greens. You can also direct seed some squash in the garden. They'll germinate in no time and they're going to get ready in about 60 days. Why not try going for a fall harvest of corn? You want to plant that in late July and that should time out just about right. If you prefer starting seeds indoors, you need to get started much earlier, probably in the first half of June. It's just going to take a little bit longer starting seeds indoors and getting them ready to transplant outdoors. The varieties that you choose to plant right now and their approximate days to harvest is going to be absolutely essential in your success. So let me go over some of the crops that I said you could plant and discuss their days to harvest. Let's start off with summer squash. That's an excellent selection right now, and it's only going to take about 48 to 68 days to harvest, depending on the variety. Some take a little bit longer and some are pretty quick. 48 days is not bad. You could plant that right now and be enjoying it in early September. Edible leaf amaranth is one of my favorite warm season greens. It's just one example, and that one can be ready in as early as 48 days. When I plant it, I tend to overseed, and I can thin some of those out and get a harvest pretty quickly. And when you plant a few square feet in this manner, you're going to get some microgreens in probably about 3 weeks. And we're not limited to vegetables right now. We can plant some flowers in the garden. You always want to do that and attract some biodiversity, some pollinators, some beneficial insects. Some of my favorites to plant right now would be zinnias and cosmos. You can have those blooming in probably around 45 days. Some of the other crops that will take a little bit longer to produce are going to be the long beans at about 72 days, southern peas about 85 days, and watermelons in general 90 days to harvest. So keep that in mind as you're watching this video, whatever the date is, depending on your region. Know your first average frost date and plant accordingly. You don't want to plant these seeds and target the harvest time right up against that first average frost. You want to give lots of leeway. Here in the Austin area, we're looking at late November for our first average frost. Ideally, I want these crops to be harvesting about the middle of October at the latest. So that would time out pretty good right now. If you're planting some watermelons that take 90 days, that's when they're going to be ready, approximately the middle of October. Not to say that they won't be ready earlier, or you could find varieties that produce more quickly. One of my favorites is the early moonbeam. That's a small icebox sized yellow flesh watermelon that can be ready really quickly. I want to share with you some of my favorite direct sowing techniques. When I plant seeds directly in the garden, I like to employ a couple of special methods. Number one is you need to cover those seeds typically. Unless it's a really small seed that needs some light exposure, you're going to need something fine to cover it up with. A lot of times I'll use a sifted compost. I got a handy metal sifter with a fine sieve on there. You can separate some of the larger particles out. You can use that as mulch. You can add it to your compost heap. You can use it later in amending soil. The thing that you're going for here is eliminating some of the heavier, sticks or rocks or anything that might be in there that could get in the way of a seed germinating. You want to try and reduce any of the impediments against its germination and vigorous growth. Likewise, if you don't have a compost sifter or some sifted compost or something like that, you can use a seed starting mix. Potting soil would be another option. If you could sift out some of those larger particles, again, that would be helpful, but that's just another idea for you to help you get some of these seeds started. Burlap is another material that can be really helpful when you're seed starting in hot and dry conditions. The burlap is essentially acting as a removable mulch. Plant your seeds and cover them up accordingly, and then make sure they're watered in really deeply. You want to water them in before you place that burlap on top. Now go ahead and put down a single layer of burlap. You might want to clip it to the side of your bed or use some rocks to weight it down so that it doesn't move if you get some wind. This really helps me if I want to keep that seed bed moist while I'm away at work or away for the day. And then when I get back in the evening, before I water that seed bed again, I'm going to remove the burlap. I don't really want to water through it. It's just not the idea of what we're going for. You will need to keep a really close eye on this situation though, because as soon as those seeds start to germinate and pop up out of that soil, you want to remove the burlap altogether. And the reason is pretty simple. It goes back to why I like to sift compost or use a seed starting mix. You don't want to have any impediments there for the seeds as they start to emerge. It could potentially stunt the seeds as they start to grow if you leave it on there for too long. And likewise, if they get kind of tangled or grow into the burlap, you're going to yank those seeds out of the soil. So while that can be a really helpful tool, direct seeding, you want to be really careful and keep a close eye on it. Over the course of time, I've learned that the neighborhood cats prove to be a little problematic when I do some seeding in the garden. And so I've become accustomed to using this 14 gauge galvanized fencing here. There's different things that you can do to deter cats from your seeding beds. Some people use a bunch of sticks. Pine straw can help. Ultimately, you're just creating a physical barrier between the soil and the paws of those cats. I have a lot of this fencing on hand. You can cut it to the size that makes sense for you and your planting. You can have a variety of sizes so that you can accommodate whatever square footage you need. And it's pretty easy to store. Store's flat, so not a whole lot to keep up with. I recently removed some of that fencing from these watermelon plantings. You see these sprouted and they're growing really well. They can get tangled in that fencing, of course, and you could easily yank them out of the soil. That would be completely counterproductive. So you need to remove the wire once those plants germinate and get a second set of leaves. I think that observation is one of the key principles of gardening. Along with that, you need to be mindful of the weather. If you're expecting some rain, that's a great time to plant some seeds. Why not let Mother Nature help you get your garden growing? A deep soaking of rainwater is going to be the best thing that you can have going on. I planted a whole lot of seeds at the end of June, and it just so happened that we got a few storms in the week after that. I'm out here today, and it's nice and overcast. We've had a little bit of rain yesterday. I've prepped a few beds for some planting, some summer crops, and this bed right behind me, I grew a bunch of corn in this spring. I really love that. You should check out that video if you haven't seen it already. But today I'm going to plant some southern peas, otherwise called field peas, cow peas. You may know them as black-eyed peas. That's a specific variety. Today I'm going to plant a variety called whippoorwill. So it's 85 days to harvest. That's about when I'll expect to have some rolling in. Of course, it's starting to rain. That's good. So I'm going to wrap it up. Most of the seeds that I planted germinated in about 3 to 4 days. When you plant the right types of crops and the soil temperatures are warm like that, you're going to get really quick germination. If you're not anticipating any seasonal rains, consider giving your bed a deep soaking. This would be done optimally with some drip irrigation or soaker hoses. That moisture should penetrate your soil to a depth of 2 to 3 inches. The principle here is that it takes time for water to get down into the soil deeply. And also, the deeper that water goes, the longer it's going to take to evaporate. These deep waterings also promote deeper and well-developed roots in plants. They'll be trained to find moisture deep in the soil. When you top water with a sprinkler, a hose, or a water wand, it's going to be more difficult to get that soil moist on a deeper level. That's going to encourage a shallow root system, which will be less able to endure periods of drought. So there really are several distinct advantages to drip irrigation. And another thing that I want to highlight is when you grow a big summer garden or it gets kind of overgrown, kind of jungly, which is fun and often the case, it can be difficult to get in there and hand water or use a sprinkler. And also, as you do that, you're encouraging fungal growth, soil-borne diseases, and things of that nature. Whether you're direct seeding or you're setting out some transplants from indoor starts, it's not over at that point. You really need to look out for them. You're basically opening up a buffet to scavenging ground-dwelling insects such as pill bugs, snails, earwigs, and a few other things. A lot of these are beneficial and they break down organic matter for you. That's a really good thing. I prefer to avoid using insecticides altogether in the garden, but when I do, I employ the lowest level necessary. Sluggo Plus has an active ingredient that's a naturally occurring bacteria found in soil. It's called spinosad. When applied in a bait form such as this, you're doing a pretty good thing in targeting those ground-dwelling insects locally. Diatomaceous earth, or DE as it's often referred to, is another low-level control that can help you once your seeds germinate. Ideally, you want to use some type of applicator and wear a mask when you apply DE. It's really fine particles, and if you inhale them, that can be a respiratory irritant. And while DE can be effective in killing some of these insects, I think it works really well as a deterrent. When I see the roly-polies interact with it, they just don't like to walk on it, and for good reason. It can tear them to shreds over time. I did have some of this insect damage early on after my seeding. I didn't put the Sluggo Plus out immediately, and I didn't put out the diatomaceous earth either. I just waited to see what would happen. And with regular observation, sometimes you can avoid using those products, but you need to really keep a close eye on it. Things can change overnight, and when you've got those damp, moist conditions there, that is going to draw in some of these insects. Like I said, they're doing their job, breaking down organic matter, and when they come across one of your tender cucumber seedlings or your squash seedlings or your beans, they're just gonna munch on it because, you know, that's delicious, it's good. Why are we growing it, you know? So you can't really blame them, but it can make it difficult to get your seeds germinated. So think about those two products that can give you a leg up in getting your seeds started. There are two season extending techniques that I want to make sure and mention to you. Number one is shade cloth. I like to use a 40% grade shade cloth and cover up my beds all day long. That provides a great level of protection for my plants while getting them enough sunlight so that they can get established and mature. Generally, once my plants get to the point where they seem like they've taken off, I may pull back the shade cloth altogether. It just depends, and I'll deal with it on a case-by-case basis. You know, I didn't mention seeding cucumbers, but that's definitely something that you can start in late July into early August, and that's one in particular that I would use the shade cloth on as long as it's over 85 or 90 degrees. You can go all out and build a hoop house and clip your shade cloth to it, or you may be able to simply drape the shade cloth over your plants. You do need to be cautious though. Just like with the galvanized fencing and the burlap, you don't want any tender seedlings to get caught up in the shade cloth because you could easily pull them out of the soil altogether. If you've got a hot spot in your garden and you're getting a lot of searing southwest sun at the end of the day, you could consider making a shield for your plants. Think about something along the lines of a flat panel trellis, but you could up the grade of your shade cloth to 60%. And that can also come in handy if you've got some reflective heat coming off of a surface such as your house. So that's two different ways that you can utilize the shade cloth. There are different grades. Just decide whether or not you need to cover your plants up all day long, or you've got a hot spot, like I said, you need to create a shield for those plants. One of the other tools that I use consistently in the garden throughout the year, but particularly in the heat of summer, is liquid seaweed. This is a soluble form made by MaxiCrop. You can also get a liquid concentrate. I like this one. It's 1 teaspoon of the powder per gallon of water. The liquid concentrate may be a little bit easier to mix up. You can apply the seaweed as frequently as weekly. The package will tell you to apply it every other week, but I haven't found that weekly applications will bother the plants at all, and I really feel like it helps to give them a shield to the intense heat of summer. Along with that, it can really help new plantings overcome transplant shock. It also works really well to encourage root development. I've been using liquid seaweed in my garden for years throughout the year, and it's one of those indispensable resources. The seaweed is really effective when delivered through a foliar application. I like to apply it really early in the morning before the sun gets high in the sky, probably about the 7 a.m. hour. Make sure you apply it to both the top and the underside of the leaves, and that will really go a long way in building up their resilience to the heat and stress of summer. Mulch is essential for helping the soil to retain moisture through the summer. It can also act as a protective barrier. The microbes in the soil will be better protected from the elements such as sun and wind. Heavy rains can compact soil just like walking on it. Bare soil can also transmit diseases directly to plants. When you've got mulch down, that's a protective layer that will reduce the transmission of soil-borne diseases. Mulch can also provide a safe haven for ground-dwelling insects, and that's something I have to balance when I'm direct seeding, particularly in the summer garden when more of those insects are active. In many cases, I'll remove the mulch ahead of my direct seeding, and I'll wait until the plants develop a good second or third set of leaves before returning that mulch. You can also direct seed a variety of... Thank you so much. That don't really work too good, by the way. I'm trying to stay the script on this somehow. I'm gonna get sunburned today. No, I'm not. It's all good. Yes, I am. It's a chopper, a hummingbird, and a butterfly. That's what kind of day it is. Lots of butterflies out today. Now check out more awesome gardening videos on my channel, like this one if you like it, and follow New Garden Road for weekly content. You can grow your own food. Keep it organic.